So again, my name is Jennifer Yessis, and I'm a faculty member within the School of Public Health Sciences. And today I'm going to talk to you, as Catherine mentioned, about a course that's part of the Masters of Public Health program within the school. And this is a course-based professional master's degree. And I'm going to talk to you today about the Capstone course. So this is the culminating course for MPH students. And as part of this course, they need to complete a capstone project. It's done as a group because in public health, collaboration is so important. And they complete a deliverable for a public health client. The deliverable might be something like a policy brief, a policy analysis, an evaluation plan, or an intervention design. As well, when they're completing this integrated learning experience, they need to also demonstrate synthesis of some of the important public health competencies. So while they're doing this group project, they also need to demonstrate and indicate what their individual contributions are and identify the competencies they're synthesizing as part of the course. So just to provide a little bit of context, this is a spring term course, but initial contact happens in the winter term. So there's initially groups that are formed, and there's a meeting with myself as the instructor to talk about the client and the deliverables they'll be doing, to talk a little bit about some of the expectations for the course. I have also made the Learn Shell, along with the PebblePad requirements, available to students in advance in case they want to start the project early or start the work early, but there's no expectation that they need to do that. So I've used PebblePad in many different ways in this course. And I do want to say, and this is something that was mentioned by both Catherine and Donna Ellis, that it was something, the use of PebblePad for this course was carefully planned out, and it included detailed instructions and examples, and that was really important. I'll just say it did require a lot of planning. There was also an open office hour the first week of the term to support students who maybe struggle with reading detailed instructions or looking at videos. So it gave them an opportunity to work with both myself, and Catherine also attended, where they were able to sort of walk through the processes with us. So I used PebblePad in 3 different ways. I'm not going to talk about the first way. It was very similar to what Deb just presented. I integrated peer review in the Capstone course, and I'll just say that with this group of students in this final culminating course for the MPH, I felt that peer review was a really important element. These students are experts at this point in the program in public health. Some of them are working there, they've completed their practicum, they've completed all of their coursework, so they have different and diverse expertise than I have. So their peer review was really important in this. So they provided peer review at 2 different times during 2 different milestones. One was the project overview and group contract, and another was the group presentation. So as part of this group project, the students complete an e-portfolio to document their learning journey. And there's some prescription with this e-portfolio. They include the different elements that are part of the course requirements. So the project overview and group contract, the presentation, and the written report. So I'll give you an example of one group who did an e-portfolio. I'm just going to go to it here. So this is an example from a few years ago so the students were given some instructions in how to do this, and they attached different things at different points during the term. So they introduced the topic, which was climate change and health, and then they introduced their group members, and they provided a group contract where they talked about each of their individual roles and how they would work together as a group, some of the different timelines that were important for the project, how they would handle conflict if it arose, and then they signed off on that altogether. They also shared their project overview, which was an overview of the topic. They talked about their client and went through their overview of it. As well, they shared their presentation. And they did their presentation orally to the entire class. I also attached the feedback template here, so students would be able to use the feedback template while they were watching the presentation. And then they also included their final report. One of the benefits of this e-portfolio that Catherine mentioned earlier is that students are able to take this with them when they graduate. So students I know in this course were able to sort of take the link with them, and they could talk to prospective employers about their experience and their learning journey, the good and the bad. And so that was really beneficial to one of the students in this group I know. So another thing that I had mentioned was that as part of the group project, students also needed to identify their individual contributions. It is, just so you know, it's very important to the Council on Education for Public Health, who accredit our program, that the individuals within the groups aren't riding the coattails of somebody in the group. So we have an individual workbook that's part of this, where students complete a proposal, 2 reflections, and a final report. One thing that I did learn when we first tested this is that the term, and this is an example from the first offering where we use this template and this workbook. The term proposal can be very overwhelming for students. But what I'll say is that PebblePad, there's lots of ways that you can integrate support to students and scaffold it so that it's not as overwhelming. So here in the project proposal, there are 2 examples that students can refer to. I've also asked questions with detailed prompts. So define the context of your capstone project. And what I mean by that is outline your perceptions about your role, state who your client is, et cetera, et cetera. So then students will document that. And I've found that by adding those prompts, it's not as daunting as an overall proposal. When they hear that word, it just sounds like a thesis proposal or something that's very large. But when you have these prompts, it's much more doable. And the same thing, the students reflect on the feedback they've received. So you can imagine in my course too, students get a 20-page PDF document of feedback from others, and they need to think about that feedback and integrate it and adjust their project accordingly after they receive the feedback. So they have an opportunity here to think about, what did I hear from my peers? And in some case, what does that mean? And now what am I going to do as a result of the feedback I received? So they're integrating that feedback. They do that twice, so at the project overview stage and then when they do their presentation. And then at the very end, they complete an overall report where they document, their overall, they talk a little bit about the report and whether they were able to achieve the competencies they set out to with the project. I have made some iterations to this since the first offering of the course. So now I also have rubrics that the instructor uses for assessing this overall individual workbook. And so that's something new that I'm trying this year. So you can see that I used PebblePad in numerous ways. I received a Light grant to try to understand the influence of this model. So what I did was, for this Light grant, examining themes from reflections and also doing interviews with students. Now, when I say this model, what I mean is the model where students include a proposal, they reflect 2 times as an individual about how they're going to integrate the feedback, and then the final sort of individual report. So that's the model. And when the model was not used, what I'm referring to is they just complete the group project overall, and they do a final reflection at the end. So that's what I mean by when the model was used and when it was not used. So some of the themes that emerged from the reflections when the students were doing the reflections and the proposal was that students were readily able to identify the transferable skills. They were able to talk about the value of peer feedback and indicate, after reflecting, what they were going to do and how they were going to integrate that into their career. And they were also able to reflect on their skills, some of their strengths, and some of their areas for growth. So some of the themes that came up from the observation reflections indicated that students were able to identify their transferable skills. So there were many different skills they identified. You can read them here. I'll just read one for you. I developed critical thinking skills and using professional judgment when synthesizing the literature review, statistics, and environmental scan. So people were able to identify those, talked about project management, they talked about working as a member of a team, etc. They were also able to reflect on and incorporate the feedback from peers. So they talked about adjusting their project and checking their own biases. So sometimes, maybe all of us do this. When we receive peer feedback, we think, I don't agree with that. But the one student here in this quote, I reflected on my reaction and saw that I was displaying my own bias as well. Clearly, if multiple people would like to see this incorporated into our work, there's value in doing so. So I know this student struggled with, well, isn't it obvious that it's related to public health? But she felt, after receiving numerous comments from students, that she did need to make it very explicit. So students also indicated that they were able to think about how in the future they'd ask their colleagues for feedback, and they recognized the value of it. So they also indicated how they would apply the skills that they learned in the workplace. So they talked about specifically which transferable skills they would apply. And one that is sort of the first one that you see there, I learned how important it is to recognize the unique strengths of team members and use those abilities to pursue project outcomes. This was a really important theme that came out, identified skill, because that's the main reason we include a group project. Public health is a collaborative exercise, and so that was really important here. So students also reflected in how the reflections aided in the skill development and how they would use it in their career going forward. And I think this is something that, things don't stop when we get out of school, and how are you going to continue this practice when you go into the field? Or if you're already in the field, how are you going to continue to use it? And one of the points that a student mentioned, I thought was really interesting. They indicated that this reflective process made me realize one thing that I'd like to do is pick 1 to 3 skills or core competencies to really focus on per year, and then seek out projects or work that align with those skills. So I thought that was pretty powerful, that they were going to actually apply this. They also talked about, how they might do this in the future, how they might reflect in the future. So again, just to highlight, use of PebblePad was through peer review, the e-portfolio for the group, and the individual reflections on learning. And this is a heavy course. Students are doing this group project. They're also doing this individual. They're talking about process, but they're also creating an outcome for our client. So there's a lot happening in this course. But I do feel that using the reflections for individuals has been helpful for them to be able to really articulate what their learning is individually, and how, and also make them really intentional that when they're doing the group project, they need to make an individual contribution. So the other thing that I just think is really important for students, and we've given them instructions for how they actually make their PebblePad account public, and how they can take the e-portfolio or their workbook with them, and that was something that's really important. So they won't lose access to it after they leave the program. And that's basically my presentation.